Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the MedTech Impact Podcast, where you get to hear from leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of medical technology. I'm Kyle Cruz,
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn.
and we're your hosts of the show.
So today on the MedTech Impact Podcast, we're delighted to be joined by Sid Desai, CEO and co-founder of Novobeing. Sid, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Sid, this is exciting to have you on the show. We recently were all together at Med Device Boston in the end of September, and we have to say that your stand was one of the most popular, drawing people in. And of course, we're going to talk a little bit about why that is and what you do. Before we get into that, though, we do like to frame it for the audience and talk about the problem being solved. So tell us, what is the big problem that Novobeing is looking to solve?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for having me here, Richard and Kyle. It's a pleasure to be here as always, and it's great to connect with you guys again. Novobeing was created with with the story. And my father, he passed away due to cancer a few years ago, and he went through multiple hospitalizations. And witnessing him go through, that journey time and time again, sort of devastated me because while his physical self was taken care of quite well, I think the emotional and psychological aspects of his medical journey really were not really paid attention to. So Nova being really the problem that we're trying to solve is how do we improve patient experience while they're stuck in healthcare contexts, while they're getting surgeries, while they're stuck in hospitals for long periods of time, while they're getting any sort of short, sessions like chemotherapy or radiation, or any of the procedures that one might use a healthcare setting for. The reality is that nobody ever said that they love the hospital, and most people that we talk to, they don't want to be in the hospital for any more than they have to be there. And so distress levels are extremely high in healthcare settings. Over 70% of people that go through a hospitalization report feeling high levels of distress and anxiety. And this is a persistent problem across all age groups and categories. So we're tackling that big problem. And the reality is that healthcare organizations don't have enough support staff that can help support patients as they're navigating their health journey with psychological support. And this is really a challenge. And they're looking for novel interventions and digital interventions to help augment their support staff, but they're really not able to come up with any. So that's really the fundamental issue that we're solving.
Well, sorry to hear for your loss, and I think a lot of the listeners can relate to, the motivators and the drivers of why you start a medical technology company. And clearly, as you point out, stress, patient experience, they're huge in terms of the effects that health or poor health can have. So within that patient experience, is there a particular focus area you're thinking about in terms of, the causes or the impacts coming from that patient experience?
Yeah, so there is typically, there are certain procedures where a cohort of patient population have to be inside of healthcare settings for long periods of time. So think about, anybody that's going in there for a surgery, anybody that's going into a healthcare setting for a transplant, whether it's a bone marrow transplant or a hard organ transplant like kidney, lung, heart, or any acute condition where they have to be in a healthcare setting for longer than 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time. For a lot of these patients, unfortunately, because they are often immunocompromised in certain cases, they can't leave the hospital floor. So as you can imagine, they're extremely distressed, by just being in that one area for long periods of time. A lot of these hospitals don't even have rooms that have windows. So imagine being stuck in a hospital room with no windows or no access to the outside world. So I think this really is a challenge. And ultimately, healthcare facilities are technically in the hospitality business, right? If you think about it, Richard, it's ultimately you're serving a patient. The patient or their insurance company is paying for that service, and if you don't get the right kind of supportive service from your healthcare facility, you're going to choose to take your services elsewhere to another hospital. So that's also a big concern within the whole patient experience bucket, is that more and more hospitals are figuring out how do we help improve not just the patient experience as they check in, as they get comfortable in their hospital stay, but how do we also augment and support their psychological needs and social isolation needs and needs that cater more, about their actual well-being than the physical condition.
It's such an interesting perspective, Kyle, when you think about what just said there
Yeah.
in terms of like that business aspect of, ultimately you're providing a service.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's really interesting too with some of the comments that Sid that you're making here. I'm super curious too, like how are, these healthcare facilities, these hospitals, how are they approaching this, whole patient experience in the first place? What are they doing today to try and help solve some of these problems?
Yeah, that's a good question, Kyle. I think the challenge is most hospital systems are operating in reactive mode and not proactive mode. We
Mhm.
all know that it's a fundamental, way of life in the U.S. healthcare system at least. And there are changes being made. There's entire patient experience groups within healthcare facilities that are solely responsible for driving, the outcome on improved patient experience. And there are some hard measures that you can use to measure patient experience today. There's something called the HCAHPS score, or Press Ganey scores. And to be honest, hospitals actually do get dinged on reimbursements if their HCAHPS scores or Press Ganey scores dip below a certain level. People, when they are looking to get a healthcare treatment, especially if it's something that's something that is not an acute event, but something that they have to plan for in advance, they do choose hospitals based on the patient experience scores, and that's a fact. And so I
Mhm.
think today, the way it's being solved, it's being done in an unorganized, sort of sporadic fashion. It's like, oh, let's put some comfortable couches here. Let's put some calming music here. Let's
Yeah.
put some plants over here. Let's put some lights over here. And let's make sure we give every patient access to a television that has access to the daily menu, for their food or entertainment options. So I think it's being done sort of in a sporadic fashion, but it's really hard to measure patient experience through sort of organic ways. And I think that's what we're looking to solve. That how do we kind of bring all these efforts into this one ecosystem so that people can actually see improved outcomes, by using technology.
Yeah, that's certainly some fascinating points. I think what's also interesting is many of the things that kind of you've mentioned that these hospitals are considering or doing today. These are, essentially things that exist right now, right? In the moment, in the present. So yeah, you can see that reactive kind of approach here. I think lighting and plants and all of that, that's been around for a long time. We know that those are ways to obviously help maybe make people feel a little bit more cozy and comfortable. So I guess how is Novo being then approaching improving the whole patient experience based on everything you just mentioned? How is Novo being going to improve that?
Yeah, great question, Kyle. So one of the things, fundamental principles that we always have thought about is, what if there was a way to take the patient outside of the healthcare context, not physically, but emotionally? And the only technology that exists in the market today that can do that is virtual reality. So our company was founded on the principle that, how do we help improve patient experience? How do we help patients feel better and recover faster using immersive technologies like virtual and mixed reality headsets? So the way we do it is we load up a virtual reality headset with a bunch of different programs. A lot of these are clinical grade mental well-being programs that are proven to reduce stress, anxiety, depression, and PTSD in certain contexts. We also loaded up with some relaxation content, some meditation and breathwork content, anything that basically helps the user as they put on a headset transport to a different place. And that, in our opinion, is the number one reason that people have been loving our product and our software, especially in healthcare settings, because as soon as they put this headset on, they're completely transported to a different place where they can engage in therapeutic interventions that are clinically designed to reduce their stress and improve their well-being. And so I think the way we see solving this patient experience problem is, not by adding more plants and improving lighting, but
Yeah.
literally taking the patient outside the context that they're in.
Yeah.
And we're not just doing this in a non-clinical fashion. We're validating the efficacy that putting somebody in a virtual reality intervention for a few minutes every single day does clinically move the needle on their well-being. And I think that's something that we're extremely proud of.
That's really fascinating to me. I mean, I'm someone too that, obviously I'm aware of the whole virtual reality headsets. I've used them before. They're really cool, but I have yet to purchase one. And I think a lot of people still have yet to actually purchase a headset, right? So you can tell that it's like, yeah, it's been here. The Oculus and other types of virtual reality headsets, yeah, they've been around, but
Yeah.
you're still from a consumer standpoint, you're not really seeing that adoption. But any consumer that's actually used one, I don't think that they can disagree that, it is an amazing experience and it's super cool. It's just, well, how often am I going to use this here? Right. So I can imagine for patients being able to go to a hospital, how neat is that? And what a cool experience it is for them where they might not have one at home either. Right. So all of a sudden they're like, oh, what's this? And they pop on that headset. And next thing you know, to your point, there's these programs, or you can take them to another part of the world where they can have this like tranquil type of experience, this meditation of some sort. So all interesting stuff. I'm curious too, Richard, here, like the program side, what Sid was saying versus the kind of, I guess, the transport side, right, to the meditation side. I think those two different aspects are quite fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so, as you say, Kyle, exciting. This type of technology finally being kind of moved from maybe this leisure aspect or how it's used into a medical environment, and it has so many opportunities. I mean, we were just discussing before we came on here about where you
Yeah.
get started, because again, I think the applications for this are literally endless. For you said getting started, tell us a little bit more about the technology. Where are you thinking about that initial use case, and how are you actually validating that use case?
Yeah. So one of the core issues that VR has always had, I actually say this, that VR has a PR problem. Most people are familiar with the use of VR or any of these immersive headsets. I don't want to just use the word VR because there's also mixed reality and augmented reality. So any kind of immersive technologies. The fundamental challenge is that people don't think that there are use cases beyond gaming. That's the number one myth that we have to bust as as a company, as a startup, that there's tons of use cases of VR beyond gaming. People are using VR to work out every day. People are using VR to meditate. People are using VR to learn new concepts and new games and new things in a spatial 3D way. So I think the technology is quite powerful. The challenge is that its use in the consumer setting hasn't been as popular because of the you know different reasons, but a lot of that is tied to like the size of the headset, the fact that people, when they come home, they have many other devices that compete for their attention, right? You've got televisions, you've got your tablet, you've got your phone, you've got your, music player. And I think VR is sort of an afterthought. And the reason is like it's still early stages for VR in the consumer setting, for sure. Until VR headsets get to a point where they're a little bit like these Ray-Ban glasses and people can wear them very conveniently, consumer adoption is definitely going to be a little bit of a challenge. And that's where, for us as a company, we focus exclusively on settings, B2B settings, where the use of this technology makes absolute sense. I mean, if you think about it, the healthcare settings are captive settings. You're not going anywhere from a hospital. If you're going to be there for 2 weeks getting surgery or treatment, you're not leaving your hospital room. You're coming back to the hospital room each and every night, and the only available option in your hospital room is a standard, issue television set, or you can bring your own tablet and phone. And I don't know about you, but I can't be watching, Price is Right all day long, right? And so I think the fact that these headsets are being used in these what we call captive contexts drives up usage quite significantly. And interestingly, one of our studies that we did with University of Calgary, we saw a 70% program completion rate of our digital health intervention, which is sort of unheard of in any digital health intervention. Like 70% of the people actually finish the entire program, which is really challenging to do in digital. So I think we're extremely happy that the modality itself is driving usage. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One is people are effectively bored in these healthcare settings. They'll pick up any tool that you'll give them, and if it's, especially if it's a tool that allows them to not be there, right? Allows them to transport, virtually to a beautiful mountain top or a beach or a forest, and engage in therapeutic interventions that are not just audio or video only, but they're also kinesthetic. And what I mean by that is people can actually interact with objects just by using their hand in this digital environments, and they can play certain immersive games that are proven to reduce their stress anxiety in these immersive settings. And I think that creates a sense of magic and connection for these individuals while they're stuck in these contexts.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, Kyle, as you pointed out, like a lot of people probably tried this out, and again, said you were talking about in a sort of home environment, but that opportunity to take people into that escapism world that virtual reality offers is huge. So again, maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about that use case of where you would get started, and again, how like when you're talking about reducing stress and improving patient experience, how you're actually measuring that.
Sure. Yeah. So our number one use case right now is for patients who are stuck in healthcare settings for long periods of time. That is our priority number one. That's our phase one go to market. And we're in this particular phase, we're focused exclusively on the stem cell transplant population. These are individuals that effectively are getting their entire bone marrow transplant done in the course of 4 weeks. They have to be there in a healthcare setting, anywhere from 20 days all the way to 45 days, depending on their condition. And as I mentioned earlier, they can't leave the hospital floor because they're immunocompromised. And I mean, if anybody gets sick, they might could potentially die. So I think it's um, the the stakes are pretty high for this population. So that's the population that we're targeting initially as our go-to-market, as our beachhead segment. But our solution is compatible with any sort of long-term hospitalization um, procedures that happen in the U.S. healthcare system, and our research has shown that we are able to effectively reduce stress and anxiety in this population. We just finished a large 80-person randomized controlled trial with Massachusetts General Hospital here in Boston, and we got the preliminary results back from them, and we moved the needle significantly on not just anxiety and distress, but also improve their quality of life. The full data readout is still a few months out, but we're extremely happy with the results. And the researcher that we worked with at MGH, she said this is by far one of the best digital health studies that she's done in this space. So that's our first sort of use case or audience that we're focused on. And then eventually, as we move into phase two, we'll also be able to focus on any hospitalizations that are between 3 to 4 days all the way to 2 weeks. I think this is the best area for using our technology. Anything lower than 3 days tends to become a little bit of a challenge when it comes to cleaning the headsets and sanitizing the headsets and recycling it to for different uses and different patient population. But every hospital that we've talked to, they've actually brought up upwards of 10 to 12 use cases to us. And so for us, we know that there is a use case pipeline that we can always tap into, but we want to maintain our focus and go after the use case where we can get the maximum ROI.
I'm quite interested, how you go about also positioning this to the hospital. It sounds like the hospital is the customer where, there might not exactly be reimbursement for a technology like this, but it's more of a strategic investment that a hospital would make to provide a better patient experience, which then results in a better hospital scoring, which results in, better reimbursement maybe for the hospital. And I think that's something you might have mentioned. Maybe you can help clarify kind of those points.
Yeah, so this technology is so new, it's certainly not the existing standard of care for hospital settings, right? So you have to almost carve out a whole new category that that hospital will have to evaluate. Now, that being said, uh, we we still believe that hospitals can purchase these directly, from us. Our eventual goal is to obviously get insurance reimbursements. But right now, we're already commercializing this technology within healthcare settings.
Mhm.
We've generated over $200,000 in revenue so far since our launch this year. And so I think there is interest from healthcare settings to buy and purchase
Mhm.
these directly. And they recognize the importance of improving patient experience and how improved patient experience actually drives better cost outcomes for the hospitals and maintain their profit margins. And so I think, but like I said, that there are inherent challenges because they don't know where to bucket this technology. There's no specific DRG or CPT code, or anything like that that's allocated for this technology at this stage. There are some companies that have gotten CPT codes for virtual reality therapy,
Mhm.
but it's a different bucket versus in hospital settings. Hospitals, some hospitals that we've talked to, they did mention that, they buy upwards of, $20,000-$30,000 worth of electronics, like tablets, iPads,
Sure.
televisions, exercise bikes for patients and patient experience. So that
Hmm.
could also be a bucket that this could fall under. But I think
Hmm.
ultimately our plan is to focus on the patient experience budgets to begin with for reimbursements, and then eventually kind of carve out a pathway for insurance payouts.
I get excited about opportunities and technologies like this for the hospital's sake because, if I'm a hospital and I'm trying to, obviously bring in certain patients for certain types of procedures, knowing that, hey, they're going to have a longer stay than usual, like you mentioned with bone marrow transplant and 4 weeks of time, right? If I'm a hospital, I'm trying to market, this virtual reality technology as a patient experience to, help get these people attention. Say, hey, if you come here, you have your procedure here, this is what your, recovery experience is going to be like. And wow, what a cool visual, type of commercial that would be, where a patient throws on a headset and it takes them to a whole nother world, or it's doing these programs and then they take it off and hey, it's time to leave and go home, and they're like, wow, like I can just totally see that being something that makes such a huge impact on people's decision on what hospital to have their procedure done at. So just super fascinating to hear.
Yeah, I think, and that's becomes really important in highly competitive markets like Boston, Philly, Chicago, like all these
Yeah,
places where there's New York, there's seven different healthcare facilities that you have a choice to go to. And what would make you pick one over the other? Certainly, that's an important factor.
absolutely. Along with obviously the doctor, right? And the physician who's doing it and their reputation. But yeah, I agree completely. I'm also interested too, you kind of touched on the potential reimbursement in the future. So what would that mean for your technology? Does that turn into like kind of a class one, class two? Is there a different, regulatory pathway for say that indication and that ability to get
Yeah.
reimbursement?
Absolutely. So right now we are commercializing under the FDA general wellness guidance, which means that we don't have to, be making any hard claims like anxiety, depression, but we can use the word stress. So, FDA has published certain guidance on what is considered a general wellness device versus what's considered, a class one or a class two. So
Mm,
that is our priority right now. But we do have on our roadmap to actually do pursue, a class two 510K. This is FDA has cleared many other virtual reality therapies or products as a medical device in the past. There's not just regulatory clearances, but there's also potential reimbursement codes that have been generated over the last couple of years by a certain companies that have been further ahead than us. And so I think we benefit from this, right? We benefit from the pathways that they've carved out for us. And we obviously are very grateful for them to kind of doing the hard work and pushing through and getting FDA clearance and getting reimbursement codes, because now we as a company, as a startup, can actually leverage these ourselves.
Yeah, it's so exciting about the potential for this. And I really feel like you're surfing a couple of waves here. One is obviously the potential of people who've been there and introduced VR to the hospital. The other one, I think, is this movement, an increasing movement, I should say, towards value-based care, because clearly when you talk about patient experience, it's all encompassing. And so as we move away from this fee-for-service towards more value-based care, something like patient experience is obviously critical to achieving that. And so I think it provides you a huge opportunity. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the business case. So if I'm a hospital or provider and I want to take on Novobeing, what does that look like as a process?
The process is quite simple, and I completely agree with you on the whole transition to value-based care. I think just like everything else in healthcare, it's probably going to be a decade-long transition, but we as a company are certainly, adapting to that future. And I certainly agree with you, Richard, that things are moving in a direction where more and more healthcare facilities are recognizing that proactively serving the needs of patients, making sure that they're being taken care of from whole human health and not just the physical part that they're there in the hospital setting to treat is important. And I think using technology like ours can help support that, especially as they experience support staff shortages and human shortages to deliver this kind of work. And so the way we would commercialize with the healthcare setting is, let's imagine a hospital is interested in potentially evaluating or purchasing our technology. The first thing we would do is we would set up a call with them. We would help them understand really what our technology is all about. We really do a deep dive into their existing problem statement. We learn a lot more from them about their customer experience, their I guess the patient experience in this case, and how are they navigating these patient experience programs today. And we try and understand what are the key sort of priorities for them for that year, and we then kind of build a case that how can we as a technology provider can align our product to their key priorities for that year. And so that's sort of the first thing that we do. The VR technology has an interesting problem. I can't do a demo of VR technology over Zoom or Microsoft Teams, right? Because it's just not, it just doesn't translate. So the second best thing we do is we actually ship out one or two demo headsets to the organization, and we have them actually try out the technology themselves. We give them access to a demo program for a little bit, and they actually then get to experience this for themselves. If obviously we have a healthcare facility that's closer to us, then we actually do a demo in person. But if not, we ship out the headset and they do a demo, and then we have another secondary meeting where we discuss that, how was their experience. And then I think from that point on, it's basically just a simple commercial deal. We just figure out how many kits of Novobeing are they looking to purchase. They can do anywhere from minimum of 5 kits all the way up to 20, 25 kits, depending on their need and use case. And then we provide them with all the support and services that go along with it. So I think once they kind of decide to work with us, we basically support them through the entire process. And the content is constantly updated as well. So they have access to not just all the clinical grade programming and wellness content that we already have on the headset currently today, but also all the other content that we might develop and load up in the future as well. And the headsets are completely automated and configured in such a way that when they receive the headset, they turn on the headset, it immediately goes straight into Novobeing. There's no need to create an account. There's no need to go onto Facebook and log in, and because we are using the MetaQuest headsets to deliver these therapeutic interventions. And we don't even have to have the headsets connect to a wireless network. So I think that reduces the friction quite a bit for a lot of these healthcare facilities.
And is this so you're leveraging another OEM for the headset, the MetaQuest that you mentioned? Is that the primary headset, or is there an option or ability to use another headset?
Yeah, so currently we have two choices. We have MetaQuest and then we have the Pico. So these are the two leading companies in the enterprise B2B space. Meta obviously is the most popular one. And while Meta does have a consumer sort of headset, there is a program or software that you can load onto the headset that effectively converts that consumer headset to a business headset.
Sure.
And what I mean by that is, it removes all the other games and everything else that comes with the Meta headset, and just allows the companies like ours to leverage the MetaQuest to deliver our therapeutic content and remove everything else. So these are the two options that we have in the market today.
That's great. And your IP is really the software and inside the headset. And I guess, is this a subscription type of based model then?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we decided right from the get-go, there's no point in reinventing, the virtual reality headset, right? Companies like Meta have spent billions of dollars in trying to come up with the best, headset out there in the market, and why not just leverage that? Just like, you would have an app loaded onto your Apple phone or your Android phone, just like that, you will have a Novobeing app loaded onto a MetaQuest headset. And yeah, at that point, it becomes a pure subscription opportunity. So our current pricing is basically $4,000 subscription per kit per year, and we have a minimum purchase of 5 kits, so that's a $20,000 investment for a healthcare setting or a hospital. And I think they could see a whole bunch of potential ROI off of this $20,000 investment in terms of improved patient experience scores, potentially lower healthcare utilization by patients, and just overall a better experience for their patients coming through the door.
Amazing, Sid. And so looking ahead, what sort of milestones you've got coming up? You mentioned obviously you've got this ongoing research project with MGH. What else have you got in the pipeline?
Yeah, so I think our current priority is, we have enough research data that we're absolutely confident that this is going to work and move the needle on the clinical outcomes for patients, right? Our randomized controlled trial with NGH, we also measured not just clinical endpoints, but we also measured economic endpoints. And what I mean by this is how do we actually move the needle on healthcare economics? Did we reduce patient length of stay? Did we improve patient experience scores? Did we reduce the number of times the patient pressed the nurse call button, right? These are actual hard financial ROI metrics that we have measured at our MGH study site. We're just waiting for that data to be collated and put together in a nice package for us. And so once we have that, I think the next stage is basically commercialization. So we are already commercializing our technology. We have already sold a bunch of units already, and so we are in the market. But I think the next phase for us is all about scaling our sales and commercialization efforts with multiple healthcare facilities around the country. And then our long-term plan, really, Richard, is to continue sort of advancing the use of immersive technology and driving, more and better mental health and behavioral health interventions through virtual reality. And so I think our plan is to continue pushing the boundary on research and figuring out what other areas and use cases this technology can be used for. And I can give you one tiny example of a project that we have with St. Jude. This is a very interesting use case. So St. Jude is using Novobeing effectively to do a mock MRI scan for pediatric patients that are undergoing radiation scans, right? And as you know, an MRI scan can be quite a cumbersome process, especially for pediatric and kids. And so we're using Novobeing to positively distract the kids before a radiation scan, so that when they actually show up for a real scan, they're not as anxious. They're calmer, and there's obviously benefits for the patient, but the important benefit here for everybody in the loop is there's reduced need for sedation for kids. And that is very important because sedation has been proven in tons of studies to have negative outcomes on kids' brain health. And so by reducing sedation, we're improving patient experience, but also improving patient health. And also, St. Jude might potentially see improved patient throughput because less anxious patients are better patients, and they will move through the scanner quickly, and that'll result in less number of times that the scanner will be down for other patients. So I think that's pretty much the other use case that we're exploring. But these are interesting use cases that are being brought up to us by our partners, and I think we're happy to kind of work with them on a select basis to figure out what use cases align with their priorities and if we can support them.
That's brilliant. I'm hearing a couple of things here. I mean, definitely that whole accessibility piece is huge in terms of this technology and the fact that in that pediatric environment, it's still super accessible and you can have that type of impact, reducing unnecessary medication. But equally, I think that commercialization you mentioned as well, I think it sounds obviously exciting because it's close. This is actually something that you're, be bringing to the market and it's going to be available, Kyle, for other people to get in the hospital setting very soon.
Yeah, well, and Sid just mentioned too that, Sid, you're planning your launch right now. You're building out your sales team. You're building out your company, right? You're preparing for that commercialization. So, ultimately, what's it going to take right now to, have a successful commercialization and get through these next stages?
Yeah, I think I'm extremely grateful for having such a strong team. My co-founder Nick has been extremely helpful in supporting us through this whole process, and we've got a stellar design and development team. And we recently onboarded a couple of key people. One of them is this gentleman, Ted Shilowitz. He's joined in as an advisor to Novobeing, but he's also an investor in Novobeing. And one of the things, Ted works at Paramount. His title is futurist at Paramount, but more importantly, he also is on the board for Moffitt Cancer Center. So he himself has been through multiple long hospitalizations, and he totally understands the use case that we're solving for. So we're extremely happy to have his support and connections, and I think that will help us, with the leg up as we start to commercialize. But we're also in the market for raising fundraising. So we're raising $2 million to basically, the fuel that we need to fully commercialize and start, closing deals. I think we're clinically validated. Our product works. Patients love it. Our NPS scores are extremely high. And so I think we have all the ducks in the row for basically collect this investment from an aligned partner and then just start commercializing at scale across health systems.
Well, fantastic. I mean, plenty of people are going to be listening into this episode, and many might be interested in getting in touch with you and seeing how they can help on your journey. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with me is my email. It's Sid, S-I-D, at novobeing.com, Novobeing.com.
Awesome. Brave man giving out the email address like that. Sometimes you hear folks say, "Oh, find me on LinkedIn," you know? So, and I'm sure they can find you there too. But yeah, that's fantastic. Appreciate that.
Yeah,
Of
absolutely,
course,
Kyle. I'm
thank you
sure they're
so
going to
much.
be queuing up, Sid, because everything you've described here and the potential for this, not just in the hospital setting, and unfortunately we kind of going to run out of time to get into this, but the post-hospital setting, there's post-hospital syndrome and just all the effects, and obviously hospitals are desperate to reduce readmissions in terms of how that can negatively impact the bottom line. And technology like this just offers so many opportunities, not just in the hospital setting, but how that can help with that transition post-hospital as well. So super excited to hear about how you get on in your future. I'm sure we're going to welcome you back at some stage. And thank you again for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Kyle, for having me here. And yeah, if anybody out there, is listening and wants to learn a little bit more about our immersive technologies, definitely reach out or needs any guidance. If you're a startup founder navigating the U.S. healthcare system, I'll tell you all about it. So happy to be a support for you.
Wonderful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, another huge thank you to Sid Desai, CEO and co-founder of Novobeing. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the MedTech Impact Podcast. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn. Until next time, keep innovating.